Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control and every executable in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind by visiting securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Security Weekly listeners can save $100 on their RSA Conference 2025 full conference pass. If you're going to buy that, you should go ahead and do it. It's next week. RSA Conference takes place April 28th through May 1st in San Francisco and on demand. And B-side San Francisco is the weekend before. To register using our discount code, you can visit securityweekly.com/RSAC25 and use the code 5U5SecWeekly. So if you already have plane tickets and you're going, but you thought you were going to get that free ticket from a vendor or something like that, and it just didn't happen, at least we can save you or your company $100. So there you go. Now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news, you can check out securityweekly.com/ESW404. If you want to follow along, check out the links, check out any snarky comments I have in here. I don't have any snarky comments really this week, I don't think. But
I'll try to make some as we go along.
Yeah. So let's jump into it. Katie, I want to start with the one that you suggested. You were afraid that this would be too political. I honestly don't think it's all that political. I think the way CVE is being managed. This is the stories about the European Union's CVE that they stood up after this whole debacle with MITRE getting defunded and the US CVE program, stuff like that. Like CVE has been kind of shaky for years, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. And there are just inherent problems with keeping up to date. Too much to talk about in one small segment here of news. But so in short, the NVD, there's now an EUVD and EU CVE database that's both announced and live. We can put the website in the show notes, I imagine. It's the euvd.anisa.europe.eu. And it's another way of tracking and classifying CVEs. And the website is still in beta, according to the Reddit post. I skimmed through it really, really quickly the other day. And API implementation is on its way. So this isn't fully fleshed out yet, but it's another database that's going to be tracking CVEs. It's going to ensure that there are multiple sources. So it brings a lot of positives and a lot of challenges. We were talking last week about what happens with vendor tools and vulnerability management if you don't have any sort of normalized CVE data. If every tool has to account for every database, it's going to be anarchy, right? But it is a good idea, I think, to decentralize some of this and try to get on some sort of a normalization wavelength across. That requires a lot of cooperation and coordination across public and private, across geographies, across competing vendors, competing nations. But this is on Reddit, and it's a small but interesting perspective on what's happening. There are a lot of people who feel like the US shouldn't be the only organization or the most authoritative to decide what these CVEs are, how they're listed, where they're listed, what classification they get. And this comes on the tail of the NIS2 directive. If you're not familiar with that, it is an EU directive that came out of the European Union, and it's similar to some of the EOs that we've been seeing over here. And it was adopted in, I think, late 2022. And it looks at the various sectors: energy, transportation, banking, digital infrastructure, and requires stronger security and better risk management. And so, as the EU puts their foot forward to make sure that their covered countries are getting the best data they can, it's not really a surprise. But there are going to be challenges, I think, because again, you've got all of those independent vendors, and now where do we pull the data from? Is it normalized? We'll give it a, what with 2025 0424, CVE, is that the same here as it is in the EU CVE database? So it's going to take a while. It's going to cause some confusion, but ultimately, the more people who are looking at this, I think the better it is. But you guys might have your own thoughts too.
I think the first thought that ran through my mind, and this is me being a little snarky, so this is not to disparage any of your thoughts on this, just thinking, coming from, we're living in the vendor space.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Now we've got to report on this and that and this. And you get the demands. Yeah. I understand why and the whole bit.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where you can kind of see it. Yep, if this thing gets traction, which there's some reason for it too, this is going to be a lot of work.
It is going to be a lot of work. But I guess my question back to you is, from where you sit and given the jobs you've had and the perspective on the industry, do you feel like it's a necessary step?
Well, I mean, I've always had the thought, there's so much that's focused online on the internet, focused on the US, because kind of where it was getting its birthplace, right? So you've got a lot of authorities set up around there, ICANN and some other stuff where that had a very historically strong presence here in the US only. To now, CVE has become this standard, but it depends on the US government behaving consistently. And
sorry,
regardless of your politics, I don't think
it's just not right now.
Consistent is not a word I would use.
Ever has, yeah.
I'm not sure if it has, but some areas were more stable than others.
Yeah,
this was kind of an area where has been left to do its thing, and it's not a big deal.
I think that's what's such a shock here is, well, for people who follow the vulnerability management space, especially in government, a bit closer, they weren't surprised to see this. But I think people that hadn't been following it that closely, expected this to just always be there, right? And not change. And to provide some perspective here, NVD is one of dozens of vulnerability databases out there. It's never been the most comprehensive vulnerability database out there. That one probably goes to OSVDB, which is now a product sold by Flashpoint, I think, because risk-based security got acquired by Flashpoint. And OSVDB typically every year has something like 20 to 25,000 more vulnerabilities in its database than CVE does. And in fact, just the other day, I was looking at Gray Noise because they track exploitation against certain vulnerabilities. They track exploit activity. And I went through a couple pages of them, and only one or two had CVEs. So I guess they're finding exploitation activity either before the CVEs are created and assigned, or there's just a lot more vulnerabilities out there that are just not never getting formally added to this database.
That's always going to be a problem because you've got a non-centralized bunch of activity, and some of these groups have no incentive to report it. Right? They'd really rather not.
I also
and
think
the thought crossed my mind. This EU, I know we're talking about CISA and MITRE and stuff like that, and CVEs. Looking at this and how it's thought out, I don't think this was stood up in a week or two. They'd already been working down this path.
Yeah.
Agree. And I think, I agree with your point. I was trying to be really delicate, saying challenges, things like that. But we do need organizations who are putting a lot of thought and consistency into it, because how much harder would a lot of people's jobs be, with the CVE database going down, coming up, going down, coming up. Like, it just
it'd be
adds
a nightmare
stress
fuel.
upon stress upon stress.
Yeah.
And
you can't rely on it.
Yeah. That's not something that's going to be remotely helpful. to state a very obvious fact. And so, I agree for sure, Jason, that this was not like, oopsie, well, we don't know what's happening with the MITRE database, so let's throw this together. That's not what this is at all. It's very clean. It's very well thought out.
And I think it was about a year ago that NVD stopped doing enrichment of some CVEs. So
February
I think
18th.
I think that's really where everybody started thinking, okay, we need a plan B.
Yeah.
And people started, probably EU started working on this. Even the CVE board, has launched an alternative.
Yeah.
All right. So that will be kind of a slow rolling dumpster fire. It's not a big hill. It's a very gradual hill. So we're going to have to check back in on this over time. I think there's a lot of good stuff we could do. Like if we were going to rebuild CVE, and NVD, these kinds of databases and standards. We know a lot more now than we used to. Exploitation activity and details have been kind of bolted on instead of built into a lot of these standards. That's been a more recent development. So maybe we'll see some innovative new stuff with the EU's version of it. As long as it's all...
We're definitely going to see AI generated recommendations. That's my prediction.
And entries for sure. Yeah, I think that's actually one of the worst things. So when CVE first started, there was a board of folks that would vote on whether or not this got to become a vulnerability and be handed a CVE. And I kind of feel like that was the right way to do it, because there's so many BS vulnerabilities out there. Like you hear me all the time talking about these got to have root to get root exploits, where you look at it and you're like, no way anybody would ever even bother with this. There's no value in this at all. It's just noise. It's
Hence give the layering noise of Kev and,
Yeah. And so we had to build something to solve that problem. And now we've got Kev and EPSS, and those kind of help with that. But what if we just didn't build the noise in the first place? But now it's stuff that's going on people's resumes. Companies are using CVs as marketing. So I think it might be too late to go back.
Who's wearing the data hat? Who's wearing the I want more data hat?
Maybe I got more than I asked for. All right, moving to funding. Really interesting. ChainGuard provides, to my knowledge, unless they've added something else, they provide secure containers. So you don't have to build your own secure container image. You can just pull it from ChainGuard, right? And then add your software to it. And they raised a $356 million Series D, which is just enormous. And I know containers are important. A lot of people use containers, but damn, that's a lot of money.
I can comment if you want. So I actually hosted theCUBE at ChainGuard's conference a month ago. So I was waist deep in ChainGuard for an entire day with all of their executives and product people.
I know really this much about them. Right? So anything you can add helps.
So because ChainGuard, they have these images, right? And not only are they more secure, but the size of them is significantly less. And, if you're working in small cloud
better performance then.
Yeah, exactly. And so basically, these images that you spin up, they're usually based on like a generic use case, and they have all of these things in them that you actually don't need to be able to run what you're running in them. So ChainGuard can automate the whole stripping out of those things. And so that was kind of the first iteration. And then they have, some future roadmaps in terms of Java libraries. So in addition to now hardened images, they're going to start doing hardened libraries. So when because people don't know that you can't just pip install shit, and that not everything that you can pip install is safe or verified, and so you have developers with
when did that happen?
intentions installing some really crazy shit. So yeah, they said,
you've missed a couple episodes, Jason.
But yeah, they started with Java libraries. They're expanding to other ones. And granted, I'm biased because I sat there all day drinking Kool-Aid, but it's between performance. Images are not going away there because spinning up images is something that's going to need to happen for a lot of the new projects we're talking about. And so to be able to do it with as least amount of risk and have them be a fraction of the size, like it's like 10% for some of them. Yeah, I mean, I can see the value there. So,
but do they have a solution for slop squatting? Can they solve slop squat? So that does actually solve typo squatting. Like that solves a lot of really legit issues out there, and supply chain security. That is part of what was in the DBIR that they were calling out there. But yeah, that makes a lot more sense. And just looking at the announcement here, like the ARR is pretty impressive. They're planning to hit 100 million in revenue in ARR this year, which is that justifies helps to justify the $3.5 billion valuation.
Yeah, I think for any security company, the sweet spot is where you can both add security and efficiency, because if budgets are tight, if you have a product that you can say, hey, this kind of pays for itself and the cost to host and run these things, they kind of threaded that needle. And I think a lot of the more successful vendors right now who continue to raise large rounds, they have some type of efficiency or cost play associated with what they're doing to help justify the upfront spend.
So maybe they're not selling. I guess it would make sense if they're not necessarily selling to the security team, if they're selling into IT, if it's coming out of IT budget, right?
Yeah. So when I asked them, they said sometimes it's just the regular engineering team. It's really whoever's in charge of the cloud infrastructure. So yeah, that also helps create some harmony and minimize some friction between security and IT.
Win-win. Yeah, that's a nice product story to be able to tell for sure. All right. A lot of AI stuff here. So Endor Labs raises $93 million. To secure AI generated code, which is very much going to be needed. You got to counter the cursor effect.
Indeed.
And then Exaforce, Virtue AI, both AI security plays. More and more of these security operations platforms. So one of the things I added here that kind of goes along with that, I know, Jackie, you probably enjoyed this report from WireSpeed, where Tim Malcolmvetter and his team did an analysis of just energy-wise what it costs to use traditional technology to automate something versus using an LLM to do it from a security operation standpoint, like responding to an alert, analyzing the alert, recommending actions, or even just taking those actions. So I don't know if, this is your passion, Jackie, if you want to talk about this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of the things I harp on a lot because I think the concept that we have about what AI should be, LLMs really checked that box, right? It was like, oh, this should be my little friendly assistant who can talk to me in English. And if I tell it to be snarky, it understands that. And if I want it to talk to me like it's, Blake Lively and Gossip Girl, it can do that. And so it's this really sexy technology that's fucking expensive. It's expensive. And because all of these cloud companies can afford to give it away for free, which actually means that everybody that's a customer of theirs is absorbing the cost, we don't realize how expensive it is. And so one, it pisses me off because it's actually expensive.
Jackie, how expensive is it?
So expensive. No, and it drives me insane because if you're building a business model right now on the cost of AI right now, and you're like, oh, I'm going to build the next whatever. It feels like .com. It really does. you're baking in the cost of AI right now, it's not realistic, right? So what they're talking about is how more basic things like pattern matching, like, there are much, much more efficient ways to do detections, to do all of the things that we're trying to throw LLMs at right now. And it's 6,000x, I think, was what they cited. Like the figures here, and they translate it to, like powering homes and things like that. It's insane. I think there's a question about what responsibility tech companies have to be good stewards of compute.
I love the measurements they use here, because on their side, they're talking about how many smartphones could you charge with the energy to measure theirs. But in order to measure agentic AI, they came up with a unit of SpaceX Falcon 9 launches. That's the level. That's the level they had to go to. Okay, this is just too big. We need a bigger measurement. How about a rocket launch, right?
Yeah.
And talking about and their analysis is very conservative. So they're talking about 7,500 alerts per year. I just saw one of these agentic AI SecOps companies saying that the average is over 4,500 alerts a day. So this is way too conservative.
Yeah.
4,500. So they're saying less than 2 days worth of what this other company said, but for a whole year. And so 7,500 alerts per year, that's 1.3 Falcon 9 rocket launches. When that's actually less than 2 days for what this other company said was the average. And what I'm thinking is, have you ever even had a breach? Like what kind of horrible alerting do we have in InfoSec that we've never had a breach, yet we get 5,000 alerts a day? Like, could you imagine your smoke alarm going off 5,000 times a day? Could you imagine getting told that you have cancer 5,000 times a day? Like, why aren't we solving that problem?
Because nobody knows how, and nobody gets an extra check mark or bonus on their mid-year performance review or their annual performance review for solving a big problem unless it can be done in a 6-month performance review cycle. And that is like almost every structure at every company is set up to incentivize short-term wins, not long-term things. And so, most of these SIMs start out with, all right, we're just going to we're going to get a SIM and we're going to put syslog in it, right? And and you start out with logs, and then you get to this point where you're like, we're just going to, if we don't put it in the SIM, we don't collect it at all. But no SIM vendor walks in and says, okay, here's the budget for the SIM. Oh, also you need to hire 2 additional headcount, because if nobody does detection engineering, the SIM is basically fucking useless, and it's going to spit out so many alerts.
Here's your smoke alarm. It's going to go off from now until the end of time.
And you're just going to rip the battery out of it and have it sitting on your kitchen counter when your kitchen burns down, because nobody wanted to, because nobody gets a bonus for putting a new battery in the smoke detector.
Yeah.
So to Jackie's comment about the cost, did anybody see Sam Altman being quoted about how many millions of dollars it was costing them because people are being polite and saying please and thank you? Just having please and thank you and processing that equates to millions of dollars in energy spent.
And nobody's saying, why is this company such fucking idiots that they don't put something on the edge to intercept a known fucking variable? They're like, oh, it's more important. Like, I get, like, it's great for the experience.
They could solve that on their side, right, Jackie?
But yes, they can solve that on the software side, save millions of dollars, and it just... This is the kind of shit that makes me want to rip my hair out.
You could handle it with JavaScript in the browser. You could intercept that with JavaScript in the browser.
Exactly.
Right?
If you know that if it's a known set of inputs, which it is, you can stop that at the edge. And it's just
and just give a canned answer. You could just give a canned answer. It would be so, but to like admonish us for the way that we're using the tool they built, you're the one that gave it a personality and made it feel like we're talking to somebody, right? Yeah. And now it's our fault for using it wrong.
Yeah.
Get out.
It's like the NSA being like, do you know how much compute power it takes when we read your license plate and connect that to all of your other movements in the country? Why don't you move less?
Right.
For those of you who are listening and not watching, you might want to go watch this clip, because when I brought that up, I thought Jackie was going to explode. Just, her whole body just.
Yeah.
I think I said one of the earliest things I said on this podcast was like, this is like watching a Black Mirror episode of Idiocracy. And it's again, like it's the trivial nature with which people treat natural resources. And that, like, we're talking about, I don't think it's not dollars. It's not the dollars that I give a fuck about. You're talking about billions of gallons of water. You're talking about millions of tons of carbon. It's just like, yeah. And we're so abstracted from the impact of things we do on computers that I sound like a friggin' Greenpeace psycho, but this is what is going to make or break this industry. Our ability to not completely alienate people from AI.
Forget all that.
Yeah.
Like we don't have a plan for if they succeed.
Yeah, no shit.
Like, okay, say this becomes the standard for SecOps for every company. There's not enough energy in the world to deploy it to all of them, right? Like the power just doesn't exist, right? And that's just one industry, that this could be, doing this kind of stuff at this scale for. So if they succeed in their plan, like that's a barrier. Like literally the amount of power available is a huge barrier. So they're going to have to find some other, like you're pointing out, Jackie, maybe some kind of hybrid model where not everything gets processed by an LLM. Every thank you and please probably shouldn't be processed in a GPU.
Well, you know what's crazy is I don't know if you saw this. I went back and forth on LinkedIn earlier this week with a CISO of a fairly large finance company, and he was talking about AI and security. And I said, like the thing I always say about generators are at 90 months lead time. Chillers are at 40 to 50 months lead time. And we also are now getting to a point where all of these data centers are going to hit like a decaying age at the same point. So all this labor that you're projecting is going to be able to be used to build data centers. Everything's going to start breaking at once because we went from 2 building campuses to 12 building campuses. We went from a megawatt to 20 megawatts, and that exponents break people's brains and they're really hard to understand. This dude's feedback was like, I'm sure the data center folks have it figured out. And I'm like, well, I happen to sleep with one of them and they don't have it figured out. They really, really don't. And so I think there's just this blind faith because of the way compute has been able to scale thus far. There's just this, people are not good at understanding exponent curves and what that translates to in physical labor and resources. Like we don't have enough concrete to put those racks on, much less do we have the silicon to make the shit that they're built out of. Like it's just impossible.
We're having trouble keeping CVE going. Like this is another orders of magnitude harder problem.
My tax return still hasn't been processed, and I submitted it 4 weeks ago. Like, I love this.
Really? Wow. Mine got done in a second.
Oh, shut up. That probably means I'm going to be audited.
Mine
either that or they really want to audit me, which is why mine got done first.
Mine was not smooth either, Jackie.
Yeah, just like we can't, like TSA's freaking scanners are down at least 1 day or 2 days a month that I travel. Like, yeah, we're a long way away from optimum compute for humanity.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to bring politics into it, but unfortunately, this is how we've grown as a country, and it's so sad. Not everything should be about politics, but with the way we're going and some of the policies that are coming out in the US, I'm not going to speak about other countries, but we're already rolling back some of the protections we have for the environment, and the environment is an issue. Come at me if you don't think it is. I don't care. I will defend, human aided and abetted climate change. We're going to have even more problems. Yeah. And with supply chains in danger over tariffs, you're saying there's not enough cement, right? There aren't enough building materials. I live with a builder. not enough building materials. We're already seeing building materials skyrocket. Who's going to build the freaking data centers, much less figure out where the energy comes from? Right?
Yeah, we shut down all the trade schools. And that's the thing, is people don't get that, like, there's all these jobs that people supposedly that are going to get back, right? Because, like, again, we're not going to get political, but we don't have people who understand how to pull fiber cable. Much less do we have 10x that amount of people. We don't have people who can work on diesel generators.
Right. Why do you think people who can work on mainframes are, raking it in right now? It's the same problem.
Yeah, like commercial chillers that are these massive machines that make the cold water that keep the data centers cold. Like, there are so few people. That's what my husband did originally, is he was a chiller expert, and he used to get flown all over the world because there are so few people who can work on these. Like, he would take emergency trips to Tahiti because he was the only person in literally this side of the hemisphere who could work on this machine. That has not changed. Our technical trade schools have not gotten better. In fact, a lot of them have shut down. Unions are not what they used to be. So we need to solve this problem from like a middle school up level, and upskilling that many laborers takes a decade. It's not something you can do overnight. Yeah. And it's the speed at which we're projecting that we're going to be able to do this is concerning. And who knows, maybe somewhere in Europe figures it out. Maybe China has to take over as the leading edge tech place because we can't get our shit together. But yeah, I would like to see us be much more realistic about these problems so that we can quickly start solving them. There are colleges out there that could quickly be solving these problems. We're just not being realistic about them.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I remember in the pandemic when nobody could drive and the roads were empty and the skies were empty, right? Mm-hmm. Remember that? And certain places in China, people saw the sky for the first time. Yeah. And I thought, okay, this is the moment. Like we won't have to argue about the environment anymore. Like this is something you can step outside and see. And I really thought that was going to be it. I thought that would be a moment everybody could share and appreciate.
We forget.
Yeah. The simulation is wired for some terrible end.
Yeah.
We can't help but keep redirecting ourselves that way.
All right. That is all the time we have today. I just want to call out a few other stories here you should check out. So there's a website called TalkBack that automatically gathers cybersecurity stories. Looks like a really interesting new cybersecurity news aggregator. I just learned about the agent-to-agent protocol from Google. So there's a lot of new technologies coming out just for agentic AI and stuff like that. And if you're anywhere near the edge of that, you need to learn about this. Also, a great piece from Gunnar Peterson on the difficulties of authentication when using MCP, which is part of how between agents things are routed. So almost think of it like a routing protocol for agentic stuff. Going to be a great new source of credential theft and accidental credential it's going to be nuts. And Kevin Beaumont goes deep on Windows Recall, which might be coming back. We'll see if Microsoft actually releases it. I think if they do release it, it's probably going to be off by default. But what else here? There's an official NPM package infected with a crypto stealing backdoor. That's a good read. M-Trends also released their report the same day as the DBIR. I think that was a huge mess up. I think pretty much everybody, if they have to choose between those reports, they're going to read the Verizon one. And a lot of people end up not reading the M-Trends one. So I think they probably should have waited a little bit.
It's interesting it didn't come out closer to their conference. You would think that would make more sense, which is in October, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Be interested to hear the inside story on that. Does not seem like something. It'd be like Black Hat and RSA being on the same day. Like, I mean, it's not like they didn't know.
2024 info, so you want to be timely with it if you can. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah.
Weird.
And then there's a piece on non-human identities and generative AI, real-world attack scenarios and best practices. This is a great read because it just throws out a bunch of ideas very very clearly, which, a lot of stuff, people talk about it in very vague terms, and this is very specific. So I really like that, with prompt examples and everything. And then there's a post-mortem for a cybersecurity company that just closed shop, which we don't see a whole lot. And one of the founders is being very open about why they failed, which we also don't see often. I've never heard of them, so I guess I'm not surprised they're going under. Like, as much as we cover startups, I never heard of Mirror is the name of the company, but I am very excited to see what he shares. It's gonna be a multi-part process. Only part 1 is out so far. And then we got to wrap with if you remember, like a week and a half ago, by the time this comes out, maybe 2 weeks ago, there was an issue with Zoom services. Zoom calls were not working correctly. And we now know why that was. Did you guys look at this?
Wasn't it? It was an issue with the .us domains, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Between the registrar and the domain provider. Mark Monitor and GoDaddy.
So Mark Monitor provides like account takeover prevention, like domain, if somebody tries to set up a domain very close to yours, so brand protection. Mark Monitor does brand protection and domain protection. And somehow they got their wires crossed, and some communication between them and GoDaddy had the zoom.us domain get shut down for an hour or two. So like, this was a miscommunication. Somebody at GoDaddy said, yeah, shut down all of Zoom right now. So if you already had a Zoom call going, you didn't need DNS. It was already cached. You were fine. But within this period of about 2 hours here on April 16th, you were not able to resolve zoom.us, so you could not join a Zoom call. And boy, is that a crazy oopsie. It's not quite CrowdStrike level incident, but that shouldn't happen. Not at the Zoom level.
There have been a handful of days the last couple weeks that I've had like multiple cloud service based things being wonky simultaneously, not on my laptop, but like making my way through the airport or, things like that I'm like, is there some type of weird attack going on that we still haven't figured out?
It's all duct tape. Everything is just held together with duct tape.
Yeah.
It's like somebody duct tape might be too strong. This might be Scotch tape, actually.
Yeah. A weaker form of tape, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Jason, Katie, Jackie, for joining me today. Really enjoyable segments, all three of them. Sorry, Jason, were you saying something? Did I cut you off?
Nope.
Okay. Wait, hold on. You didn't announce Jason, and you didn't tell him what day it is, and he has to answer before we leave.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. So,
I missed something.
Yeah, so you should listen to one of the intros sometime. So Jason Wood joined us. The second one, I forgot again to introduce him. But there's always some silly national, international day being celebrated. It's usually marketing stuff. But this week it was National Bucket List Day. So we all shared something off our bucket list. So now you have to share something on your bucket list.
Something on my bucket list. I never wrote a bucket list. I don't know.
Anything come to mind that you've always wanted to do but haven't done yet?
Well, I think one of the things that came away from this last month while I was gone, because I had to do some traveling, was just hopefully some plans for me and my wife to do a little traveling in the near future.
We all
out of the country
reached for traveling. Yeah. It was traveling for, except for the 1Password CEO. He wants to plant a crop. That was his. He wants to plant a crop.
Well, I'm in the process of that, so that didn't cross my mind.
We're all doing that. It was like this common midlife thing that everybody starts to try to keep other things alive as they're starting to slowly die.
I was trying to end on a good note, Jackie.
And get away from the keyboards.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's kind of predictable. A bunch of people who spend all their time in front of a computer want to go outside and travel, right?
Yeah.
But I like it because it's something we can all afford to do. At these points in our careers, like we can do stuff on that bucket list. Like nobody said go to space or go to Mars or anything like that. It's all stuff we could do if we wanted to, which is pretty cool. All right, next week I'll be doing live interviews from RSA on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I'll also be speaking at B-Side San Francisco at noon on Sunday. And so there'll be no show next week, but all those interviews will be live all week long on YouTube. So you can check that out on our YouTube channel. And we'll be back May 12th with a sponsored interview from Fastly on how to build a successful security architecture team with Fastly's Deputy CISO, Fernando Medrano. See you then. Bye-bye.